Welcome to Film and TV Review.com. Catch the latest film, TV and streamed show reviews every week. The views and opinions expressed by the authors and those providing comments are theirs alone. They do not reflect the views, opinions or position of Film and TV Review.com or their respective parent companies or affiliates. Film and TV Review.com makes no representations as to accuracy, completeness, correctness, suitability, or validity of any information in this program and is for entertainment purposes only. Episodes may contain adult humor and language. For full terms and conditions, see Film and TV Review.com.
Hello there, and welcome to our special Film and TV Review interview with those who work in the industry. Today I'm to be joined by Sarada Duvvuri.
Yes.
She's an accomplished film and television producer, nearly like 2 decades of experience in pretty much high-profile projects for Netflix, Disney, HBO, and countless more on the Chicago crime documentary beat as your stomping ground, I guess, for a large part of your career. She's an executive in charge of productions and a line producer who's managed multi-million-dollar budgets, close to about 300 hours of programming, I'm guessing now, and founder of ST Productions. But beyond that, you're also a storyteller, I'm guessing, and you've dedicated to become now a mission-driven creator, host of a podcast yourself, The Fire Inside, and founder of the Rise Project, a non-profit focus on elevating survivor stories. Sarada, welcome to the show. Your journey is initially anything but a linear one. I'm guessing you started in broadcast journalism, is where the direction you wanted to go, from Illinois State, graduated in English, and I guess you had a love of classical writing initially. I mean, you're Indian or Asian descent, and so I'm guessing you're growing up in America, quite a lot of spheres of influence. Did you always really want creative writing or journalism as your kind of direction you wanted to go initially?
Yeah. Well, first off, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. Great to be here. Yeah, I actually have always been very fascinated with the truth of humanity in general and where people come from and why things are the way they are. I'm generally just a very curious person. So my wish of wanting to go into broadcast journalism really had to be about, telling stories and helping get the word out to people about what's happening in the world and where it's coming from. I had the pleasure when I was in college of doing some on-camera work. I was working for a Fox affiliate in my hometown and also doing some work for the college station. And I learned really quickly that I was actually pretty camera shy. And so that's when I was like, maybe I should stick to working behind the camera. But I've always been a writer. I've always been into creative storytelling in general since I was a child. And so when I pivoted in college to getting that English degree, it was because I loved writing and reading so much. And talking about early influences, The Sound and the Fury by William Faulkner was actually one of my favorite books because, it's 4 chapters told from not only the perspective of the 4 main characters, but the stream of consciousness, their stream of consciousness. So it's so interesting because one of the main characters, Benji, is autistic. And so it really helped me understand that to understand people, you really have to understand the way that they think. And to do that is almost impossible unless you jump into their own brain. But it does help you see that, we really do all have different perspectives of the same situation that's going on, different understandings from that based on our capabilities. And so that reminds you that there's really a million different ways to tell any story. And I think they teach you in English that there's like seven major storylines in the world, and that's it, but a million different ways to tell them. And so that kind of got me more fascinated in documentary storytelling
Sure.
specifically, wanting to go from news to then documentaries because it's real life people living real life circumstances and getting the opportunity to understand how we can shape that story to also help provide new perspectives.
I mean, you're entering into the production world. I mean, initially, I guess you armed not with, a resume, huge resume, but you got like your first PA spot in the History Channel. I think it's a pivotal first
Yeah.
step for anyone trying to enter that business. And there's no
Yeah.
thing as luck in these situations. How did you kind of navigate that
That's
field?
actually
Because
one of my favorite stories because I knew I wanted to get into working behind the camera. And so I just started telling my entire network of friends and family that that's what I wanted to pivot into. I also wanted to write. So I started just applying to random companies to see if I could write for them, public newspapers, magazines. And one day, one of my best friends who lived in Chicago at the time, she was one of my best friends at the time, lived in Chicago, and she said, the family that I nanny for, their neighbor actually works at a documentary production company here in Chicago. You should come up and meet him. We're having a block party. Would you want to come? So I said, sure. So I drove up the next weekend, went to this block party on her block, met this gentleman, and asked him if there's any way I could sit down with him for a meeting and talk to him about my interest of getting into television, especially in documentaries. So he said, sure. So I go to his house a couple of days later. I'm dressed up in full corporate attire with a portfolio in my hand, and he's wearing shorts and a t-shirt with his kids running around. And he says, so tell me why you want to get into documentary television. I say, my spiel about my interest in, real life people, real life stories, and how I've always wanted to do that. And he's looking at my resume and he's like, there is nothing on here that shows that you worked anywhere in production. I mean, I worked at this Fox affiliate, but I was the receptionist and I did a little bit of on-camera work just for fun. And then there's like fast food restaurants, there's like an insurance company, just like the kind of college jobs you would expect, right? And I said, yeah, you won't really find anything on there that can tell you that I can do this job. But I promise you one thing, that if you open this door for me, you'll never regret it. It's the only thing I can promise you. And you would think that with such an amazing line like that he would have hired me on the spot,
on the
right?
spot,
I
yeah.
was talking to him because Gangland on the History Channel was what they were staffing for, and it was season one. And there
Mm,
was 6 positions available for a production assistant job. And the rate was like $600 a week. That's it for like a 3-month contract. That's what I was applying for. So you would think with that line, he would have just brought me in right away, but he didn't. So, he was like, I'll be in touch. And I was like, sounds great. So a week later, thanked him for the sit down conversation and said, how's it looking? And he's like, well, we hired one of the positions, but there's 5 more spots left. We'll let you know. So then I emailed him the next week, 4 spots left. The next week, 3 spots left. The next week, 2 spots left. Not exaggerating when I say I kept pleading
mm.
and telling him and assuring him this is where I'm meant to be. And I got the very last production assistant job on Gangland with absolutely no guarantee of work past 3 months.
Yeesh.
And that was 20 years ago.
Uh, um, so, I mean, obviously, you took to it well, but what does it mean to you when someone says, "What does a producer do?"
We're wrangling cats and dogs. That's truly the joke we all have. It really is just being the hub of every single department and understanding what the needs are of every single person, not just that's working on the production, but but who's paying for the production, and who's producing it, like the production company, the network, all your staff and crew, and understanding what everyone's needs are and exactly how to accomplish them. I think is probably the best way to describe a producer. Yes, it is logistical, but it's also creative and it's also a lot of hand-holding. It's also HR, it's also motivational speaking. It's also, playing therapist at times. So you
Mm,
just have to really like be comfortable you know, not just managing all the people and elements that are combined to make this thing happen, but
Mm.
also providing a path for everyone to collaborate effectively.
I mean, yeah, I mean, you worked in, obviously, as your career's gone on, in big productions and like projects like Netflix's Starting Five or Sprint. Can you paint a picture? I mean, what a typical, I mean, you're wearing lots of hats. Typically, how would you kind of like start digesting that? And because the
Yeah.
stress that you must be under because you've got, looks like, sound like 101 different problems. You've got to solve them basically, and you're the go-to. How do you, is there any kind of process or kind of like, what's your secret almost? But how, what would you best advise you approaching a kind of a multi-pie problem like this? So you have a plan,
Yeah.
you write it down beforehand or get it on the head. So what it,
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I'll tell you the answer that my mentor told me early on in the industry before I even stepped into management. And that's to always have a plan B, C, and D
Mhm.
because um, anything and everything will fall through the cracks. And staying cool and calm and collected is the best way to approach it. And the only way you can stay cool, calm, and collected is to know that it could happen and that you have a backup plan if it does. So a lot of us like experience, of course, is the number one thing that helps me with this. And also having had the privilege of moving through the industry from the bottom up, like from the production assistant position, not only in one genre, but in multiple genres. I think that really helps. And of course, with my specific trajectory, I've done that in multiple cities. I built my career in Chicago, went to New York, established myself in New York, came to LA, established myself here, established myself in Atlanta. And all the shows I've done have been international as well. So, I've just been around enough and seen how things work in different genres to understand what could go wrong when and where. So when I'm building my budgets and I'm building my staffing plans and I'm building my schedules, I'm building in contingencies that will support a plan B, C, or D if anything happens. So in terms of specifically what the process looks like, it really is sitting down and making sure that you know where your variables are in your creative. For example, a director might come in and say, "Hey, I know that this is maybe just a regular true crime show, right? It's got B-roll, it's got interviews, and we've got reenactments, and we've got archive. Those are the four elements that make up a documentary for the most part, right? So like maybe it's a true crime show that is for Netflix. So you can already tell by your budget, or you can already tell by your creative, your treatment when you look at it that, okay, this can be done with, just a regular Canon, whatever camera. But the director might want to introduce a red, for some stylistic recreations, or they might want to introduce. So just in case, let me pad my budget and my resources to be able to support a camera of this caliber in the event, or equipment or drones or whatever it is, right? Or maybe an art department. It's like you just have to almost know by looking at the creative if there's a possibility it could go in that direction. And if so, you kind of pad your budget, pad your schedule, pad your staffing plan so that it can support that. If you have room to move within the limitations that the network is paying for.
Mm. I mean, you've worked on some intense and challenging true crime projects.
Yeah.
Famously, it's like Find Our Missing and Crime Scene for TV1
Yeah.
as a line producer. I mean,
Yeah, Find Our Missing specifically was finding Black and missing stories that were underrepresented. And for that show, I actually booked the entire second season myself, meaning I found all the stories, cast all the um, interviewees for each episode, got each episode, wrote up episode descriptions, got them approved by the network, which was TV1 at the time, and then went into production manage the second season. And so it was really helpful to, not only be able to cast that first season and find the stories myself, but then go in and manage the logistics of it because as I'm casting it and booking it, I'm keeping that budget and schedule in mind of what we're capable of doing. But yeah, the purpose of the show was to just bring more awareness to these stories that had not gotten enough attention. And it was incredibly difficult
Mm,
because I'm talking to parents, mothers specifically, who have told this story so many times to friends and families, told their grievances so many times. And after a while, people don't have the capacity to listen anymore. So with me, it was like hours and hours of just wanting to get support, get another ear to listen, you know? And so it's like you have to manage that relationship with kid gloves pretty much, you know, as much sensitivity as you possibly can, because this is their real life. While
mm.
we're also trying to make a show to help create a platform to give them more exposure, but we also need to make sure that we're being very sensitive of their emotions and, you know, their story at the same time.
Yes. I mean, how delve into how do you navigate that safely? I mean, I guess it takes a lot of them to even share that story because I'm guessing some of these are cold cases or maybe so to relive that. I mean, how do you find that kind of almost ethical balance where you have a story to tell, but that almost that pain is central to that narrative, and then does it take a time to kind of get coax someone to share their story or and also when you're making the program as a producer, are you able to tailor it because maybe a director has a bit more aggressive slant on it and you want to vary it back? Do you have any control on that or how do you navigate something sensitively like that? Do you have any control?
Well, I guess it depends on the position, right? So in Find Our Missing and also with Crime Scene, um, in Find Our Missing, I booked the show but then handed it off to producers to actually design the creative look of the show. And then, excuse me, I would give them notes if there was anything that was sensitive creatively that they shouldn't touch that could potentially um, be a moral or ethical crossing of this of a boundary, right? But then for crime scene also, like I was working logistics mostly, so I don't have much creative input, which I don't feel that I need because I know the people that are working that, who I collaborate with on a regular basis are, you know, very sensitive to the topics in general. I don't think that any of us would say that it's difficult to find people to participate either in missing shows or crime shows per se, because a lot of times depending on who you're looking to cast, they want the exposure, they want the story out there, so that helps. I think the way to establish trust, though, is to remember that we're human first. And I think that that authenticity and honesty is what makes people want to say yes to doing the show. So we lead with our humanity. That's one thing that I always do is relate to them in some way, shape, or form, based off of not just the stories I've been exposed to, but maybe experiences I've had in my own life as well that I can relate to them with.
Sure. I mean, yeah, of course, trust can open up, but um, do you have, how do you actually seek these stories? Because you said a lot of these are kind of like not what overlooked stories, which maybe in minorities, and you actually said, I mean, you sought out these stories of season two.
Yeah.
How did you start digging around? Where did you look, or who did you? Because I'm guessing a lot of this will just be buried or forgotten almost.
To some degree, I mean, we're following network guidelines a lot of times. So sometimes those guidelines might say something like within the last 10 years, right? Or the last like
Okay.
7 years. So that kind of helps. Um, so I would Google stories, maybe in the news. And even if they didn't get much exposure, they would have gotten at least one or two. For that specific series, we were also working with a foundation called the Black and Missing Foundation. So they helped us fed us a lot of our stories, which really helped. But in general, on shows like this, it's a regular Google search. We also call law enforcement officials in different cities and just say, do you have any um, cases that have not been solved of this criteria? You know, within this time frame, within this city limit, blah, blah, blah. So we just kind of do that too. I would say that's probably the most.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess a good particular example of was I mean, challenges, as you say, of in that kind of genre or kind of like topic is murdered in Montana, which is was a crime scene in Texas, I suppose. But you became a supervising producer there. It seems again a lot of logistical puzzles with very. I guess these are going to be quite cold cases because this is approaching those missing in the Native American community and getting them to participate in maybe buried very like I say very cold cases. How did your team approach that? Because that is something that you really do, I assume, have to dig in a bit more deep and coax a bit more. How did how did your team approach that?
Yeah, so we were profiling three stories of missing girls that had been missing and found murdered. I believe they were all found murdered. Can't totally remember at the moment. No, they were all missing and murdered. But it was a part of a larger problem in general in the Native American community, and that one in Montana specifically, in just the number of people that go missing and are never found or that are found murdered, but it's a case that's not solved. So those cases were already approved by the time I came on the show, so I can't really speak to how they found their sport stories in particular. But I will say that booking interviews, which is one of the things I helped with within the Native American community, wasn't the easiest at all. It was a lot of establishing trust as much as we could with local law enforcement officials and stuff, which we did end up getting. The families, of course, wanted the exposure, so that was great. One of my jobs was to, outside of booking local law enforcement, was to arrange the exhumation of a 14-year-old girl who had been buried at that point for 2 years and find a network approved forensic pathologist, which there aren't that many, by the way, forensic pathologists in the nation, let alone a network approved one that would perform a second autopsy on her. So um, we were able to make that happen successfully. We found Dr. Sarah Wecht, who actually had done JonBenet Ramsey and JFK, and he was network approved. And we got her, I mean, we had to get special permissions because she was buried on tribal land. So to
Mm.
get her exhumed and film it and get her body um, sent to him for a second autopsy, be able to film that and then get her in the ground safely, which we did with all the proper permissions and safely. And that was done on, in the show. And we were so grateful, that we were able to establish the trust that we did with the community to be able to get
Mm.
that done. But that's what it was. It was a lot of like talking to them for hours and just continuously persisting and establishing trust and letting them know our true mission behind the entire documentary and the purpose of it.
I mean, how you can't help but get absorb some of the kind of like stress and processing of these stories when you kind of just almost discovering it with yourself again and investigative kind of capacity.
Yeah.
Do you absorb any of that stress? Are you someone who maybe does absorb it, or do you have a support network when you because you do cover some quite the crime beat for quite a lot of your career. So how do you process it, or do you not let it phase you, or what's
What is stress?
good question?
No, I'm just joking. Dirty martinis for sure.
Of course.
They help. They help a lot. No, I have a great network of friends and family that I can talk to, specifically friends in the true crime space. We very often call each other and say, I don't think I can do this anymore, or man, this is getting very difficult because, no matter how much you've done it or even lived it yourself, it does. It's taxing to hear the pain and suffering that people go through or to see it with your own eyes. Like I remember my first time ever, I was on Gangland at the time, my first time seeing a photo that wasn't blurred out, right? Because everybody else that watches the documentary sees the
Oh
blurred
yeah.
photos. We don't. And it was a woman that was shot at close range with a rifle. And I'll never forget what that image looked like. And I couldn't stop staring at it because it is so not normal. It's not
Yeah.
what you ever would see or want to see.
Mm.
And so yeah, there's some images burnt into our minds that won't ever go away that you just accept as not just part of the job, but also part of life. And that ultimately you remember what you're here for, which is to tell a story of what really happened in whatever circumstance this is, whether it's true crime, whether it's food, lifestyle, you're presenting real life stories to the public and saying, here's what this is. Um, and here's all the information we found about it for your
Mm.
information. There was a show I did, I'd love to talk about called Inside 9/11. And what's interesting is that it was actually, I was in between shows at the production company in Chicago, and I had 2 weeks in between. So I asked the production company, is there any other show you want me to help out on these 2 weeks? I mean, I can take a 2 week vacation before my next show starts, or you can throw me onto another show that I can help out on. So they threw me onto a show called Inside 9/11. And since I was only going to be on it for 2 weeks, the producers wanted to give me something to do that would be easy for me to jump in and out. And so they asked me to transcribe the thousands of phone calls that were made to 911 that day.
Jeez.
And if there's one part of my career I genuinely never talk about with anyone ever, it's that. I think I've
Mm.
only said it out loud maybe once because I will never get those voices out of my head, because yeah, you can only imagine the terror or um, disbelief or denial or uh, just the painful emotions people were going through in that moment. And I will say that that was probably a moment where I was like, I think I need to step away from true crime for a while.
Mm.
I didn't, but I did eventually get to, once this next show that I'd already been signed on to was done. But that was a tough one. That was a tough
Mm.
one. And I don't think there's anything you can do to truly cope with that. You just have to know it,
Mm.
accept it, and continue to move forward and be grateful for the time that you have here.
Yeah. Mm. I mean, you tend to kind of like obviously this passion of these types of stories into now kind of like your own platform, or you have for a while actually.
Yeah.
Your podcast creating the fire inside, and it seems like a more of a personal mission statement or direction with your professional career. I mean, what prompted you to step from like maybe on camera or to the microphone? I guess in an interviewer capacity now. What was the reason that you could push you there?
Yeah. So, as I said earlier, I've always been interested in storytelling in general. I've always been interested in going into the creative. So, when I entered into the industry, it was on a documentary as a production assistant, and then I quickly moved up to an associate producer. After that, in documentaries specifically, your next trajectory is typically to go into logistics and go into production coordinating, managing, line producing, head of production.
Mm.
Or from an associate producer position, you can go into field producing, producer, writer, story producer, showrunner, right? There's kind of this trajectory you can take. That's sort of the documentary way. And so after around that time, I had thought I was going to go into a creative direction, but I had witnessed sort of a lot of people being disgruntled with the production process. And I needed to know if the industry that I just stepped into was that kind of industry or if it was really just a management thing. And so I decided to go into the logistics side of the industry to find out. And that's why my trajectory went in the direction it did. And when I did go that direction, I found out it really is about leadership. And it really is about, great management, right? They always say shit rolls downhill. It's kind of true, So with great management, you can have everything you can meet all your goals at the end of a production. So I had done that. I'd gotten to, work as a line producer for many years, an executive in charge. And when that happened, I kept thinking, okay, what's next in my career? Should I keep working as an EIC, a VP, a head of production, or could I exercise this creative side of me that I've had in me this whole time as well, and maybe open up something towards that? Well, I did both because I love my career. I absolutely love managing productions. I think I'm really good at it, and I love making budgets and schedules and hiring people, and collaborating with creative. I love it so much. So I don't want to let that go. But how do I pick up the creative side of my life? Where do I even start? is kind of what I thought. And then I thought, well, why not start with something that's passionate to me? And one thing that's always been passionate to me was understanding, how people move. Like, how do they get through life, right? Very similar to how you're asking me right now. So I'm like, when I was growing up, this isn't much different from most people out there. Um, I needed guides in various areas to understand how to get from point A to point B. Yes, I do have a story of trauma in my past, and to understand like how do I put one foot in front of the other, right? But even somebody who's having a stressful time in life, just knowing how to get out of bed, sometimes they need to know like where do I get the motivation from? So it's really anything. I would hear stories of people through different platforms, whether it was magazines or radio or TV, like offering that advice and that perspective of, well, here's what I did to get through this. And I thought, wait, how cool would it be if I could create a platform where I bring people on to talk about how they got through their challenges, not just how did it happen, but where did it come from? Why did you choose that path? And when I was 10, I had sort of a life altering circumstance come into my life. And at that time, I don't know where or how it happened, but these three words popped into my head: persevere, overcome, rise. And I don't even think I was conscious of that. Um, it just happened, and I kept saying that to myself over the decades. And so when it came time to start the podcast, I use that as sort of the theme of the podcast. So I define perseverance as the act of enduring. What did you endure? And then I define overcoming as the act of accepting your circumstances for what they are. Because if we don't accept our circumstances, we can't really move forward, right? You have to accept that this is what happened. Or like when you're grieving, right? Like, okay, I've lost this person. This is where I am today. And this is what it meant to me. And this is where I'm going, right? So we have to kind of go through that acceptance period, which a lot of people don't.
Mm.
But once you reach that point, there's another thing that happens in some people's lives where they have a rise, which I define as you turned your pain into purpose. And to me, this is like such a harrowing journey in a person's life. It's such a heroic tale, to be able to say, not only did I survive it, not only did I learn to accept that this is my new life, but now I want to go and help other people who might be going through this so that their trajectory could be easier than mine was. That's a ton of selfishness right there, And so I want to find out, where does that come from?
Mm.
From inside of your soul, inside of your being, like, because it's very different, that answer. You'd be surprised.
Yeah. Any particular stories that you found like totally quite inspiring? I mean, even
So
shocked
many.
you? Yeah.
Every one of them. Every one of them.
Mm.
One of our episodes that got the most number of listeners to date is a gentleman who escaped his life in a cult.
Oh.
And not only did he escape, but it was so interesting. Um, the cult leader's daughter was missing, and there was news reports about it. People were trying to find her. Nobody knew. I somehow got lucky, and when I was researching the story, found a private investigator and contacted him. I mean, I even had somebody had caught wind that I was researching the story, one of the journalists, and contacted me to say, "Hey, I've written about this story for a long time. I'm actually looking for the daughter too. If you find her, can you let me know?" And I was like, "Oh, sure, whatever." And then I find this private investigator somehow, and he's like, so he looks me up. We form a relationship over the phone, like two, three conversations. And then he says, "Okay, I'll tell you what. I'm just going to give you one name. You call this person and you'll get everything you need."
Mm.
And I was like, "Okay, good." And he's like, "Don't tell anyone you talk to me." And I was like, "Fine." So, needless to say, I never shared that information with anyone, but I went and called that one person, and that person was the person that I interviewed for my podcast. Because that person, not only was he dating the cult leader's daughter, so I knew exactly where she was, I found her, but then on top of that, he gave me so many other people and all this information about the crazy things that go on there. So yeah, that was definitely a great one. And then I would love to mention, um, Josh was his name, by the way, and I'd love to mention Belinda. So Belinda is a great friend of mine, and She is the reason why I officially decided it was time to start the podcast. So I was working on a show called Court Cam as an executive in charge. And Court Cam was a clip show for A&E about outrageous courtroom moments caught on camera. So Belinda's daughter had been kidnapped, raped, murdered, and dismembered. And there was a long search for her, and they eventually found her that she was, just a couple of miles away from their house. So the trials were going on, and when they were, there's this clip that went viral of, you know, her daughter's father. He asks the judge if he can address his daughter's killer, Michael Madsen, in court. The judge says yes. So he turns around. He's a very large man in a blue shirt. He turns around. He's looking at his daughter's killer, and the guy smirks at him. And he gets so mad that he jumps across the bench to try to deck him in the face, and he misses him by like an inch, but the clip goes viral. So we find the clip and we decide to, do a story on it for the series. So at the time, I wanted to find him. So I was helping out the producers to find him to do an interview with him. And I found this Facebook page. So I emailed and just said, "Hey, I'm looking for this gentleman, blah, blah, blah." And the woman that wrote back was Belinda. And we jump on the phone and I say, "Oh, you're her mother." And instantly, whatever I was working on at the time went out the window in my brain. And I just went into human mode and let her know, "I'm so sorry. And who are you?" And we just met and we just talked, and that was it. And she had said no to interviews with everyone. Like she said no, she said to even Nancy Grace. And but she did an interview with our show. And she said, and the reason why is because you're the first person to talk to me like a human and not for the sake of the story, you know? And we ended up becoming great friends. And through that, I said, you know what? She mentioned something to me about forgiveness. And she says, because she forgave her daughter's killer in open court. And I said, how did you do that? Like, where does that even come from? Right? She talked about her faith, talked about all this other stuff. And I said, okay, that makes sense. But also, like, why, Um, and she says, and how did you know? That's what I said. How did you know you even forgave? And she
Mm,
says, well, you really forgave someone based on how you feel when you're around them. And that was such great advice for me because I had thought that I had forgiven certain people in my life. But I realized that when I was around them, I was different. I was either overcompensating or trying to bring some good energy or acting differently just to make sure that energy was nice and light. And I found that to be so profound. I was like, you need to say that on a platform. I'm going to start this now. And so I took her and a few other people that I had had the pleasure of meeting through various documentaries. And that's when I started the first season of the podcast. And
mm.
she was my first episode.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've kind of taken that kind of mission a bit step further because you're founding the Rise Project, which
Yeah.
is so is this a non-profit dedicated to elevating what survivor stories, advancing, I guess, systematic change for it? I mean, what's the I guess what was the catalyst of creating that story? But I'm guessing creating
Yeah.
that organization. I'm guessing it's because you've been listening to these stories. But what's the aim of or goal of the Rise Project for those who haven't not familiar with the Rise Project?
For sure, yeah. So I've actually always wanted to have a nonprofit. It's actually a lifetime humanitarian goal for me. I think just being an avid traveler, but also growing up in both India and America, I've seen a lot of um, social and economic differences. And so one of the things I've always wanted to do is sort of give back to humanity. So starting the Rise Project, its mission really is uniting communities through trauma healing initiatives. So our first initiative is the Fire Inside in the sense that, you know, somebody like me who grew up completely differently than Belinda, we're different races, we were born in different countries, we have completely different upbringings, right? Can still build community together and consider each other close friends because we can bond on experiences that we had that are completely different, but what we take from that and how we grow from that um, is the same in terms of being able to go, hey, here's what I got from this experience, and now I can give it to you so that you can grow in your own experience, right? And I think that that builds community. And the more and more we do that, we really get to see that we really are the same when it comes to, emotions and experiences that we have in life, regardless of whether it's colored differently. Okay. So, wanting to expand that into profiling stories of, you know, um, harrowing journeys in documentaries as well. So I'd like to also have an initiative where I have documentaries where we profile these stories, and then also community events that we can do to help raise money for communities in domestically and also internationally. So I'd love to take it kind of as big as I can to be able to unite communities across the globe.
Mm. So now you kind of like bring us up to speed. You founded SD Productions, which is, I guess, a focus on building and keeping relationships. So, what's the name of that company? Is it? I mean, you're a leader. I mean, you've got a huge experience in building teams for countless shows. Um, what was the purpose of that company? What you personally, I
Yeah.
guess, mission statement for that company?
Yeah. Well, SC Productions really is a full service production company that can provide anything from development to execution and services, primarily in television and film and in the unscripted genre.
Hmm.
Um, and it was really built to be just that, to be able to take in projects, develop them under the production company banner, and offer all these services in departments that I've worked in for a long time. So, and really choosing projects that are mission based, along with sort of things that I've worked on across the industry, but also that I'm interested in, which is, telling real life stories of people that are um, in these incredible journeys.
Hmm. Um, what kind of like stories are you yearning? Any particular projects you got that you're yearning to tell with under SD Productions, or any kind of like you can just tell us a bit that you'd want to aim to do, or stories that you have in mind that you want to see?
Absolutely. Yeah. No, there's a lot actually. They're just I guess to sum it up, since I can't get into any of them individually because of these NDAs we have signed, but
Mhm.
they're all stories of personal journeys of people that have um in one way or another, whether it was by the system or by you know, their own environment in which they grew up in, had to fight through challenges that have kept them uh, from moving forward. So there's a few different things we're working on that are really just like a human breakthrough stories.
The so I suppose to keep it to circle, if someone came looking for a job, they have a small, tiny resume, maybe not that experience, they're coming to you. What kind of qualities are you looking for? You think that might get them through the door? I mean, just from it's kind of a flip side now. You're on the other side, so what do you tend to look for in someone who's once again production?
Passion and positivity.
Yeah.
I'll say that. Passion and positivity and resilience. I do think that obviously skill is part of it, right? Depends on what part of the industry they want to get into, where their interest lies. All that is technical for the most part, right? Like, do you know what you want to do? Do you not? Do you kind of want to get in and go into producing or camera department or art department? A general idea of that is great, obviously. But I think outside of that, in terms of what you would need within your own person, it really is just a lot of passion and positivity, resilience. It's not an easy industry to get into, but once you're in it, it's definitely not an easy one to stay in. I mean, we're seeing that a lot right now, even. We've been in a lull for a couple years, and
Mm.
I can't tell you how many people have called my phone that have been in the industry for a year, and some that have been in the industry for 30 years, longer than me. And they're just like, I don't know what to do next. I can't keep my bills paid, like where are the jobs going to come from? And I think it's being able to pivot, quickly, and being resilient and having faith in yourself, and a lot of positivity will take you a long way. Another thing I was told when I first entered the industry was that It was my very first show ever. And my manager on that show said, "You have a lot of positive energy." He's like, "Please, whatever you do, keep that because it's going to take you a long way." And he's right. It did.
Well, I think we'll draw to close there. Thank you for that quite insider look at the industry and your career. Thank you. Hope that fire is still burns inside of you and in your stories that you bring to us in the future. For you listening at home, thank you. And thank you,
Thank
Sarah.
you.
We hope you enjoyed this film and TV review.com episode. Catch the latest film and TV reviews, together with regular episode content from the world of film and TV every week. See you soon. Would you like to reach our film and TV review podcast audience? Do you have a product or service of interest to film and TV home consumers or followers of the entertainment industry? Have a film or show production to publicize? For affordable price plans for all budgets, get in touch and find out about our introductory advertising options. Reach our audience of film and TV viewers and visit our site contact page at filmandtvreview.com, or you can email us at business@filmandtvreview.com. Reach out today.